Hey everybody, so today what I want to do, I'd like to do something fun. I would like to compare the Apple Watch 5 versus the Garmin Forerunner 945 in an open water swim in a swimming pool. Yes, why a swimming pool? Because, first of all, I see this question asked on the forums all the time. Can I use these devices to swim in a pool? So we're going to test that theory out. And secondly, I personally swim in a swimming pool sometimes. I've got a pool, my HOA has a pool about 75 yards away from my house that I swim at in the mornings after my runs, after my bikes. For example, this morning, I went for a run and it was 90 degrees. I was super hot and I do a brick workout where I go swim in a pool anywhere from like 10 to 20 minutes depending on how I feel that day. So I swam in a pool today for about 10 to 12 minutes after my workout. So a brick workout, my heart rate was already going. Let's compare and see how each of these devices did. So the first thing I did is I set up my devices. Garmin, I turn on open water swim, wait for the GPS to connect. Apple, you can't wait for the GPS to connect. There are some tricks to kind of get it to work, like you turn on workouts and hope that it's going to connect. So I did that. But I started them at the exact same time. So the first thing that I did when I started my workout is I swam to the end of the pool and stopped. I did this because I know end to end of my pool is 21 yards exactly. So what I did is I stopped at the end to see how each watch would do at one end of the pool. Sure enough, I stopped, I looked at my wrists. It took a couple seconds to get there, but each one stopped at 21 yards. So I thought, wow, this is actually going to be a really good experiment. These are probably going to be pretty accurate. Let's continue on. So I just continued the rest of my workout. I didn't do more stopping. I tried to do different things like swim underwater sometimes. I did freestyle stroke, I did breaststroke, and I did the backstroke. I swam for, again, about 11 minutes or so, stopped each workout, and now compared them. So let's take a look. Let's get into there. Let's get in the GPS. Let's get in the heart rate. And then let's just look at what each of these kind of watches provides as far as data. And then I'll give my overall recommendations. Okay, first thing, GPS. Let's see how they did. So total that I swam for 14 laps. Well, that's actually 7 back and forth, 14 up and down total. For a total of 294 yards. So how did Apple do? Apple said that I swam for 161 yards. 161. Garmin said that I swam for 349. 349. So Apple way underestimated, about like half. And Garmin overestimated by a little bit. Apple underestimated by 133 yards. 130, literally, almost half of what it was. Whereas Garmin overestimated by 55 yards. So Garmin was way closer. I mean, way closer. Still inaccurate, but way closer. And it's not surprising it's inaccurate because when you're swimming these small distances back and forth, it's really difficult for a GPS to figure out exactly what you're doing. But let's just take a look at the graph. So if you look at the charts here, you can see Apple on the way left-hand side, Garmin's the chart on the right-hand side of it. Each one of these is pretty inaccurate just looking at it. You can see both of them actually calculated me swimming outside of the pool and in the same places. They're both pretty accurate to each other for the most part. I mean, there are some differences there. But, when you look at like the overall picture, they both look pretty inaccurate together. But you could tell there was the difference in the distance and how each calculated that. And you can see like the start of Apple is like showing me in my my pool house. Whereas and I think that's just because when Apple Watch started, it doesn't start correctly because it doesn't tell you GPS is going. But you can see how the map looked for both of them. Okay, so that's the GPS. Garmin, I give it to Garmin, way, way, way closer compared to Apple for the GPS. Let's take a look at heart rate. Okay, so heart rate. For Apple, it says my average heart rate is 122, and Garmin says it's 120. That's actually surprisingly close to one another. And you have to remember, wrist-based heart rate in an open water, in any kind of swim, is not accurate. Both companies will tell you this is not an accurate way to test your heart rate in the water. But considering both of them were about pretty close to one another, I gotta say that's pretty good. They each were pretty close, and I gotta say, like, the way I felt, and based on other workouts that I do when I cool down after my runs, That's about where my heart rate is, usually in that zone 2, zone 3 area. So I don't think these were wildly inaccurate whatsoever. I think they were probably pretty close. So I think as far as the wrist heart rate, it worked pretty well for me in the pool. Each watch did a good job, pretty close to average. So now let's take a look at some of the other data each of these watches provide. So here's Apple first. So you can see Apple, you can see the kind of data that they provide for your swims. They don't give you tons of stuff compared to Garmin, and that's not surprising. Apple's the smartwatch company, Garmin's a fitness company. So it's not surprising, I mean, Garmin focuses on fitness for their watches. So it's not surprising that Garmin will give you more. But here's what Apple gives you. One of the things I do like is they do tell you what strokes you swam and how long you swam each one. So you can see it's telling me I swam freestyle, backstroke, breaststroke. Like, pretty cool that it does show me that. Now let's take a look at the Garmin. Garmin has more screens because there's a lot more data they're giving me. They're giving me things like SWOLF and all kinds of stuff. I do really like the Garmin gives you the anaerobic and aerobic calculations. I do like that they give me an exercise load. And I'm not even showing you like training effect and all the other components the Garmin gives you with workouts. So Garmin gives you significantly more, which is not surprising. But pretty cool to see what each of these devices does for an open water workout in a swimming pool. And pretty cool to see how each handles it. So I gotta say, I give it to Garmin, hands down, way better, simply because the GPS was so much more accurate compared to Apple's. Even though Garmin overestimated it, man, it didn't overestimate it by double, just a little bit. It overestimated by 55 yards, whereas Apple underestimated by 133 yards. I'd say those are both pretty large inaccuracies, but Garmin was way closer to more accurate. So I gotta hand it to them. Heart rate, they're both pretty good. I think they both did the same. So, if you're thinking about buying a watch for in the pool, you don't buy a watch for in the pool. You buy a watch for open water swimming, or you buy a watch to swim when you're properly going to do a pool swim and set it to the correct yards or meters. But this was a fun exercise, a fun activity, just to see how these devices would handle it later on.